Hello everybody, on this very rainy day. You can see, I don't know if you can see outside the windows. It is really rainy here today in New Hampshire. And I'm in my car. I just got back from doing some running around, dropping kids off different places, and running some errands for another kid. So I want to talk to you today about kind of a variety of things. There are a lot of documentaries around Halloween. They try to put them up, of scary things like serial killers. And a while back, we started to see, Jeffrey Dahmer documentaries really take center stage. So Netflix has one, Peacock has one, I think Hulu has one. I've been watching bits and pieces. I do know a little bit about the serial killer, Jeffrey Dahmer. And so I wanted to just talk a few minutes about his situation. So the one on Netflix is pretty hard to watch. It's a dramatization, and it kind of begins, it has a lot of flashback things throughout, where it flashes back to different parts of his childhood, kind of trying to almost make an assertion about why he became a serial killer. And, I think that kind of speculation is kind of rough, because we do know that both nature, meaning genetics, so if, someone in your family has mental illness, you could get it too, especially serious mental illness like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. And Dahmer's mom had mental illness, and it was pretty severe. And I believe it ended with her taking her own life. She definitely had struggles throughout his childhood with it. And then the second piece of it is nurture. So we talk about how a child was raised and how that impacts who they become. And so particularly the Netflix one really looks at, how he was raised. Now, if you go to some of the other, streaming services and you watch interviews with Dahmer directly, he actually told interviewers, so Peacock has one, I'm trying to remember if I watched it on Peacock or if it was on Hulu, but I think pretty much all the streaming services at this point have a Jeffrey Dahmer documentary as we come, towards Halloween. I think they just thought, hey, this is a good scary time of year to talk about this very scary individual. And, not to be afraid, he's no longer with us. I did hear radio announcers saying that, there were people who planned on dressing as Dahmer for Halloween. And I just want to discourage you from doing that right now. And please don't let your children do it either, because it is disrespectful to the families of the victims. This man was a horrible criminal who was very, very crazy, possibly possessed by demons or something supernatural. And the things he did were just really awful. He really dehumanized his victims. He really made them objects for his own pleasure, as most serial killers do. But, he really kind of took it to the nth degree with the cannibalizing of his victims and the collecting of pieces and parts of his victims. So it really is just kind of too horrible, I think, to celebrate in any way. And there are a lot of people who really feel that, dressing as him for Halloween or letting your children do that would be celebrating these heinous things that this man did while he was, still operating as a serial killer. So moving on, getting back to the nature versus nurture idea. So nurturing, Jeffrey Dahmer himself actually said, I wasn't abused as a child. There wasn't childhood trauma. This is not why I did this. So I just encourage you to really, if you want to know about Jeffrey Dahmer, in my opinion, watching things where they're actually interviewing him and talking to him will give you better clues as to who he was versus dramatic representations that involve, someone else's idea of why he did what he did. As a forensic psychology consultant, I always think it's better to go back to the source if you can. And of course, there are times when we can't interview people. We don't have access, or it's dangerous, or it's just not a good idea because it might antagonize that person. But definitely getting as close to the source as possible is always good. And, talking to people that grew up with an individual is one way to do that. Again, I don't remember which streaming service, but one of the streaming services offered a documentary where they did that. They went and they talked to his classmates, and they said, look, he was always a weird guy. He would hop. One guy said, when we did pictures for yearbook, and, he would hop into pictures with groups, even if he wasn't in that club. And so we would have to just sort of like black him out later, because he was never in that club. And I thought, wow, that is so weird. It's weird that he would hop in the pictures, and it's weird that they would black him out later. I mean, there's definitely more to that story. And as an investigator, I do look at the psychological aspect, obviously. I'm a forensic psychology expert. Well, I'm working on it. But at the same time, from a spiritual aspect, there's some really weird stuff about Jeffrey Dahmer as well. I don't know if it's true. I haven't gotten that far with my research, and I'll definitely update you guys with another video on Jeffrey Dahmer if I do have time to get that far. But I did hear once that he said that he thought he was possessed by demons, and that he gave his life to Christ in jail, and that he really believed, that God had forgiven him, and he had asked for forgiveness from the victims and from the victims' families. And I don't know if that's true or not. I need to research that better to confirm that. But if that is the case, I have to say, there really could be something to that. We look for good explanations, but sometimes the good explanation is something that is beyond our understanding. It is something that maybe we don't have evidence for or proof for in a normal sort of way. I think humans in general are very interested in the supernatural. If you don't believe me, just check out all the shows. Yesterday I was watching an episode of Ghost Hunter, and it was Zach Bagans, and it was the first episode he ever did of that show. No, maybe it was the second episode. And it was about the Houghton Mansion, which is in Massachusetts and is believed to be very haunted. So as humans, maybe you could call this my Halloween special. We do really look for supernatural things that maybe we don't have an explanation for. So that's the first part of this video. Just a little bit about Jeffrey Dahmer. I wanted to just touch base on it because I think it's very relevant right now with all of these things on streaming services. Again, the Netflix one was not my favorite. I really, really liked some of the other streaming services where they interviewed the real Dahmer directly. To me, those interviews are gold, because you can really start to put some things together. So I would encourage you to shop around. Don't just settle on the first, thing that you see when it comes to information about a serial killer, or any other criminal for that matter. Really try to watch different things and get different viewpoints before you make a decision about whether or not, this person was born that way, or became that way because of abuse or things like that, trauma. Remember that most of us have trauma, but most of us choose to overcome it and not let it turn us into a monster. So maybe that's something, my friends, that you want to study. What is the thing that helps people overcome trauma and not become a Jeffrey Dahmer? That might be maybe a really interesting thing to focus on. Anyway, second thing I just wanted to touch on. I haven't made a video for about a month. I'm still working on my dissertation. And at this point, I'm trying to get police officers who are willing to volunteer to talk to me just via phone. I don't need to see your face. I don't need to know where you're from. I don't need to know your gender or your rank. I just need to be able to verify in some way that you are a police officer. So, if you hit me up, on social media or whatever, and, we can figure out a way for me to somehow verify that you are, involved in policing full time. That would be great. And the other thing is, what I'm doing is I'm just talking to police officers about the last domestic violence call that they attended. So, I apologize. Asthma. It's great. It's like having a cold every day. Anyway, I just would like to talk to police officers about the last domestic violence call they attended. I have a few short questions. The interview will probably take between 30 and 60 minutes. I do have to read informed consent at the beginning of the call. It has to be recorded. But again, I don't need any identifiers. I don't need a way to trace it back to you. The reason I'm doing it is because domestic violence in my state leads to 60% of all female homicides. So what I really would like, I would love police officers from my state, which is New Hampshire, to call me and tell me what they are seeing and hearing on these calls and in these situations. We have to find an answer. Now, we're never going to get rid of domestic violence. We're never going to get rid of abusive people. But if we can learn to de-escalate these things before they are so violent and out of control that someone gets killed, either a police officer on the call or the woman later down the road, that is the goal. In some parts of the country, I watched a video recently about some police in St. Paul, Minnesota, I believe. They figured it out. They had 1 homicide last year from domestic violence. So there are parts of the country where police officers are doing this very well. And I'm looking for those pieces. What do these police officers do well that keeps people on the call safe? What can be improved? What are we missing as far as identifying the aggressor or identifying the victim? I'm looking for these pieces. And if you know a police officer, and you want to talk to them on my behalf, that's great. Let them know. Say, hey, it would be great if you could call this lady and talk to her about the last domestic violence call that you attended. That would be great. That's what I'm looking for. I just really, really need to close out this study. I need to graduate, working on my PhD. And I only have a couple of interviews. I have a couple of police officers who were brave and they called me. I asked them the questions and they gave me some great information. I'm very eager to pass this information on to other police officers. The best way I could do this would be to complete this study successfully and have this published out there in academia so that others can see, hey, police officers aren't jerks. They are definitely struggling with all these things, but also, here are the ways that police officers who are successful are doing things. That would be amazing. That's really the goal. That's the goal of the research. It's kind of where I'm at right now with forensic psychology. This is the vehicle through which I mean to help victims. I continue to help victims who need resources, representation, advice, an ear. So if you know people who need to talk to somebody about domestic violence in their life or in the life of someone they care about, they should call me too. Now, again, if you want to find me on the web, it's pretty easy. Just Google Marsha Roberts or Marsha Roberts Michaels, Mikels, because I remarried and that's my new husband's last name. And you can find my Facebook and you can message me there and my phone number is there. Or you can Google Roberts Michaels Consultancy. This is a consultancy that my current husband and I started 10 years ago. We started working on it together. He is a security expert. He worked in clubs doing security for about 20 years. And, I have a degree in forensic psychology. I have a master's in forensic psychology currently, trying to complete my PhD in forensic psychology. And our goal is really to help with the pandemic of domestic violence that is besieging our towns and our cities and our country and countries all over the world. Women and children are being killed. Again, like I said, in my state, it's a 60% overlap. I've heard reports from other people that it's a 50% overlap in other parts of the world. We know some other statistics. The United Nations did a study recently, and they found that 90% of all murders are committed by men, and 10% are committed by women worldwide. And that's a huge statistic, because what it tells us is that when it comes to lethality, when it comes to who's dying, it really is at the hands of male perpetrators. Now, also in this study, they found that more men are dying than women. And so that's true. So we do need answers. We do need answers to help figure out why men are so violent. I mean, one answer might have to do with domestic violence. If they're growing up in a home where violence is always the answer and where they run to, that could be part of the problem as well. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I didn't mean this to be too lecture-y, but I did want to let all of you know what else I've been working on and how you can help. So these are some ways that you can help with this fight against domestic violence and abuse. And with that, I think I'm going to hang up. I'm going to sign off for the day. I have lots of things waiting for me in the house that I have to do, both as a mom and as a forensic psychology consultant and as a PhD student. So take care, stay safe, and please feel free to reach out if there's anything we can do to help you. Thanks.